Ethan Carter had always believed that some homes carried a certain warmth, an atmosphere that made you feel welcome even before you stepped through the front door. That was exactly how he felt every time he visited the Reed family household. The Reeds lived on a quiet street lined with tall maple trees, their leaves brushing softly against the wind as if whispering secrets. Ethan had come to know the house well over the years, its creaking porch steps, the scent of pine that drifted from the backyard, and the unshakable feeling of comfort that settled over him the moment he entered. He was 22 now, though he still felt like the same kid who used to ride his bike with his best friend Jacob Reed, racing down the street until their legs burned. Their friendship had started when they were 12, a random pairing in a middle school science project that somehow turned into a bond strong enough to survive high school, part-time jobs, and even Jacob moving out of state for college. Whenever Jacob returned home on breaks, the first person he called, without fail, was Ethan. But this time Jacob wasn't home. And yet Ethan found himself walking up the familiar porch steps anyway. He wasn't sure why he came by that afternoon. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was the way the house made him feel at ease. It could also be that, in Jacob's absence, he missed the presence of someone else in the Reed home, someone far older, quieter, and more complicated. Daniel Reed, Jacob's father. Ethan hadn't meant to notice him. It had happened slowly, naturally, without intention. Mr. Reed had always been the calm presence in the household, tall, reserved, with the kind of voice that sounded like it had weathered storms and still remained smooth. He worked as a high school guidance counselor, a job Ethan always thought fit him. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard. Whenever Ethan visited, Mr. Reed would greet him with that gentle nod and warm, tired smile. "Good to see you, Ethan," he would say, like he genuinely meant it. Over the years, Ethan began to realize he looked forward to that greeting more than he should have. Still, he never acknowledged it, not even to himself. Now, standing at the door, Ethan took a slow breath before knocking. He half expected no one to answer, but after a few seconds the door opened, revealing Daniel Reed on the other side. He wore a navy shirt with the sleeves rolled just enough to expose the lines of his forearms. His hair, a mix of deep brown and soft gray, was slightly tousled, as though he had been running his hand through it out of habit. "Ethan," Daniel said, surprise flickering in his dark eyes. "Didn't expect to see you today." Ethan felt warmth flood his face for reasons he didn't want to examine. "Hey, Mr. Reed. I was just in the area." Daniel smiled, one of those small, sincere ones that reached his eyes. "Well, come in. It's been a while." The moment Ethan stepped inside, the familiar scent of cedar and coffee welcomed him like an old friend. The living room looked the same as always, tidy, comfortable, lit with the soft afternoon sun streaming through the windows. A half-finished book sat open on the armrest of the couch, and Ethan recognized the cover immediately. Daniel always said reading helped quiet the mind after long workdays. "Jacob still away?" Ethan asked as he sat down. "For another 2 weeks," Daniel said, closing the door behind them. "You know he's excited to see you when he gets back." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, he texted me. Told me to take care of his dad while he's gone." Daniel laughed softly, the sound low and warm. "I think he meant help with the yard, not whatever this is." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Whatever this is." The words hung in the air longer than he expected. Daniel cleared his throat as if he felt it too. "Do you want something to drink?" "I just made coffee." "Sure," Ethan said. While Daniel walked into the kitchen, Ethan let his eyes wander. Photos lined the shelves, Jacob in his football uniform, the Reed family at the lake, a younger Daniel holding baby Jacob with a smile that reached somewhere far deeper than the camera lens. Ethan's gaze lingered on one photo in particular. Daniel in his early 30s, hair darker, expression softer. Something in Ethan's chest tightened again. He rubbed his hands together, trying to push away the strange heaviness growing in him. When Daniel returned with 2 mugs, he set one gently in front of Ethan. Their fingers brushed briefly, just a second maybe less, but it was enough to send a quiet shiver down Ethan's spine. "Thanks," Ethan murmured. Daniel sat across from him. "You been keeping busy? Work going well?" "Yeah," Ethan said. "Just long hours." "I get that." Daniel nodded slowly. "Some days you blink and the whole week is gone." There was something in his tone, fatigue, loneliness, something unspoken. Ethan noticed it every time, but today it seemed heavier. Maybe because the house felt quieter than usual. Maybe because Jacob wasn't around to fill the empty spaces with laughter. Or maybe because Ethan was becoming too aware of the man sitting across from him. Daniel leaned back, studying him for a moment. "You've changed a lot, you know?" Ethan blinked. "How?" "You've grown up," Daniel said simply. "There's a confidence in you now. A steadiness. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Compliments from Daniel always felt different, deeper, more personal. He cleared his throat. I guess that happens. It does, Daniel said softly. But sometimes I think people don't notice change until they're finally ready to see it. Ethan wasn't sure if Daniel meant him or himself. The words felt layered, carrying a weight that made Ethan shift slightly in his seat. A moment of silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with something neither of them dared to name. Ethan finally cleared his throat. I should probably head home soon. Daniel nodded, but there was a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Of course. Just, don't be a stranger, all right? Never, Ethan said before he could stop himself. Daniel smiled, gentle, warm, and just a little too meaningful. As Ethan stepped out onto the porch, the late afternoon air felt cooler than before, brushing against his skin as though reminding him he was still standing in the real world. But inside, something had shifted, subtly but unmistakably. He wasn't sure where it would lead. All he knew was that the Reed household no longer felt like just his friend's home. It felt like something far more complicated than that. Something he wasn't ready to admit. Something he wasn't sure he could avoid. The next few days passed quietly for Ethan, but Daniel Reed stayed firmly in his thoughts in a way Ethan couldn't shake. He tried distracting himself, extra shifts at work, long walks, late-night movies, but nothing helped. His mind kept wandering back to the house on Maple Street, to the warm light coming through the windows, to Daniel's low voice saying he had changed, grown up. It left Ethan feeling restless and unsettled. By Thursday evening, he found himself driving toward the Reed house again, even though he hadn't planned to. He wasn't sure if he was going for Daniel or for comfort, or maybe for answers he didn't yet understand. When he parked outside the house, the sky was turning a deep purple, the first stars appearing like quiet observers. Ethan hesitated before getting out of the car. He wasn't sure he should be there again so soon. But something deeper pushed him forward. He walked up the porch steps, half expecting the lights to be off, but to his surprise, a warm glow seeped from the living room curtains. His heartbeat picked up. He raised his hand and knocked, softly at first, then again with a little more confidence. The door cracked open and Daniel appeared, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans, his hair slightly damp as if he had just showered. A faint scent of soap and cologne drifted out, catching Ethan off guard and sending his nerves into a sudden spin. Ethan, Daniel said, eyebrows rising with unexpected warmth. I really didn't expect to see you today. Ethan swallowed. I was driving by. Thought I'd stop in. Daniel smiled gently, steps aside. You're always welcome here. Come in. Ethan stepped inside, feeling that same familiar comfort, but tonight something felt different. The air felt heavier, quieter, more intimate. Maybe it was the time of evening. Maybe it was the empty house. Or maybe it was because Ethan was finally noticing things he had tried to ignore before. Daniel closed the door softly and folded his arms in a way that seemed almost self-conscious. I was just making tea, he said. You want some? Sure, Ethan said. As Daniel moved into the kitchen, Ethan walked deeper into the living room. It looked slightly dimmer than usual, lit only by a warm lamp in the corner. The soft glow highlighted the framed photos on the shelves and cast shadows that felt strangely calming. But more than anything, Ethan felt aware of every sound Daniel made in the next room, the quiet clink of a mug, the kettle warming, the soft exhale of breath. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, trying to calm his nerves. When Daniel returned, he carried 2 steaming mugs. He set one on the coffee table and sat beside Ethan. Not too close, not too far, but just close enough that Ethan felt the warmth of his presence. You okay? Daniel asked quietly, studying him. Ethan hesitated. Yeah. Just needed to get out of the house. Daniel nodded, but his eyes lingered, gentle and curious. You've seemed a little distracted lately. Ethan looked down at his hands. Just thinking a lot. About what? Ethan didn't answer right away. How was he supposed to explain thoughts he didn't fully understand himself? Instead he shrugged. Life. Work. Everything. Daniel leaned back, resting an arm on the back of the couch. You're allowed to talk to me, you know. You always have been. Ethan stared at him for a moment. Daniel looked calm, but there was something else beneath the surface. Something hesitant, something searching. I know, Ethan said softly. It's just complicated. Daniel's expression shifted, eyes softening. Everything that matters usually is. Another silence settled between them, heavier this time. Then something unexpected happened. A faint rumble of thunder echoed outside. The sudden sound made the lamps flicker, and Ethan instinctively looked toward the window. The storm must have rolled in quickly. Rain was already beginning to dot the glass. I didn't know it was supposed to storm, Ethan said. Neither did I, Daniel replied. Another flash of lightning lit the room for just a second. The thunder that followed rumbled slowly, like a warning or a reminder of how quiet the house truly was. Daniel let out a slow breath. Ethan, can I ask you something? Ethan turned toward him. Of course. Daniel hesitated, not like someone searching for words but like someone afraid to say them. The other day, he began slowly, when you left, it felt like there was something on your mind. Something you wanted to say but didn't. Ethan's heart thudded hard against his ribs. And I'm not asking to make you uncomfortable, Daniel added calmly. I just care. Maybe more than I should. The last sentence hung in the air like electricity. Ethan felt his breath catch. More than you should? Daniel looked away briefly, eyes settling on the rain outside. You're my son's best friend. I know the lines that should exist. I know them very well. His voice softened, almost pained. And yet, I find myself thinking about you more than is appropriate. Ethan's throat tightened. He wasn't expecting that, not in such clear words, not spoken so gently. Daniel, Ethan whispered before he even realized he had spoken his name instead of Mr. Reed. Daniel's eyes lifted and something in them flickered, surprise, maybe even hope. You don't have to say anything, Daniel said quickly. I needed to be honest, even if it makes things complicated. He took a shaky breath. You've become important to me. Not just as Jacob's friend. As Ethan. The room felt suddenly smaller. Quieter. Warmer. Ethan could feel his pulse in his fingertips. I didn't mean to make things awkward, Daniel continued, voice low. If you want distance, I'll understand. Ethan shook his head gently. No. I just didn't know you felt that way. Daniel offered a faint smile, sad, hopeful, vulnerable all at once. I've been trying not to. A long moment passed. Ethan felt his own voice trembling. You didn't make things awkward. I just don't know what to do with it. Daniel nodded, understanding without judgment. You don't have to do anything. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know you're meaningful. To me. Ethan felt something deep inside shift, something he had been ignoring, refusing to acknowledge. He swallowed. You're meaningful to me too. Daniel's breath hitched almost imperceptibly. He didn't move closer, didn't reach out, didn't cross a line. But the emotional space between them closed anyway, drawn tight by honesty neither had expected tonight. Outside, thunder rolled again, softer this time as if settling into the background. Inside, the air changed. The tension wasn't frightening. It was intimate. Quiet. Real. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to see the truth he had been avoiding. Whatever this was, whatever it might become, it was no longer something he could deny. The storm eased into a steady rainfall, the kind that created a soft background hush, like the world had lowered its voice. Inside the Reed house, that quiet felt almost intimate, too intimate. Ethan sat stiffly on the couch, hands clasped together, heart thudding in his chest like it was trying to speak for him. Daniel wasn't looking at him anymore. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on the window, jaw tight, as if bracing for whatever Ethan might say next. After his confession, the air between them had changed, thick with meaning neither of them knew how to handle. Ethan exhaled softly. Daniel? Daniel turned, his eyes softer than before but shadowed with worry. You don't owe me a response, Ethan. You don't owe me anything at all. That's not true, Ethan said quietly. You've always been there for me. Since I was a kid. He paused, searching for the right words. I'm not ignoring how I feel. I just don't understand it yet. Daniel's expression shifted. Relief, sadness, longing, all tangled together. I never wanted to put you in this position. But you didn't, Ethan said, shaking his head. Not really. I'm the one who keeps coming back here. Daniel let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. That doesn't mean I should let myself feel things I shouldn't. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Why do you think you shouldn't? Daniel blinked, startled by the question. Because I'm older. Because I'm your best friend's father. Because the situation is complicated. Complicated, Ethan echoed. But not wrong? Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know, he admitted. I truly don't. The honesty in his voice made Ethan's chest tighten. Daniel wasn't a man who spoke carelessly. He weighed his words, held them until he was sure. And now he was speaking with a vulnerability Ethan had never seen in him before. I felt alone for a long time, Daniel said slowly. Longer than most people realize. When my marriage ended, Jacob was so young and I put everything into raising him, into being stable, predictable. He looked down at his hands. Feelings like this weren't part of the plan. Ethan's voice softened. When did it start? Daniel's eyes lifted to his. I don't know the exact moment. Maybe last year. Maybe earlier. Maybe the day I realized I was looking forward to your visits even when Jacob wasn't around. He exhaled shakily. That scared me. Ethan felt something stir deep inside, something tender, something frightening. Why scared? Daniel looked at him like the answer was obvious. Because you matter to me. Too much. The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. His breath caught, and he felt suddenly unsteady as though the room had shifted. He leaned back slowly, staring at the ceiling for a moment as he tried to untangle the knot inside him. You're not the only one confused, Ethan admitted, voice quiet but firm. I don't know when things change for me either. But I know they did. Daniel's posture stiffened, hopeful but cautious. Ethan. I'm not saying I understand it, Ethan interrupted gently. I don't. I'm not saying I know what to do. I don't. He swallowed. But I don't want to pretend I feel nothing. Because that would be a lie. Daniel looked at him for a long moment, the kind of look filled with emotion that couldn't be spoken aloud. It wasn't a look of possession or expectation. It was simply a man seeing something he never allowed himself to hope for. Come here, Daniel said softly, not a command, not even a request, just a fragile invitation. Ethan hesitated only a moment before shifting slightly closer on the couch. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the space between them was smaller, warmer, alive. Daniel took a slow breath. Ethan, what do you want? The question struck him harder than any confession. What do you want? Ethan's throat tightened. I want to understand this, he whispered. I want to figure out why my chest gets tight when you look at me. Why I keep thinking about you when I shouldn't. Why part of me feels safe with you even now. Daniel closed his eyes like the words physically hit him. Ethan continued, voice quiet. But I also want to do the right thing. For you, for me, for Jacob. At the mention of his son, Daniel flinched. Jacob, he's the reason I tried to hide this. The reason I didn't say anything earlier. His voice was ragged. I never wanted to betray his trust. And you haven't, Ethan said firmly. We haven't done anything wrong. We're just talking. Talking, Daniel repeated, as if the word was both a comfort and a torment. The rain outside softened, fading into a gentle drizzle. Inside, neither spoke for a long moment. Finally, Ethan said quietly, Do you regret telling me? Daniel looked at him with an expression so raw, Ethan felt it in his bones. No. I regret letting myself feel this long before I told you. But I don't regret the truth. Ethan exhaled shakily. A mix of guilt and something softer twisted inside him. I'm scared, he admitted. Because I don't want to hurt anyone. Especially you. Daniel's voice was almost a whisper. You could never hurt me intentionally. That's part of why this is so complicated. Ethan felt heat crawl into his chest. Emotion, not desire. A kind of tender ache he didn't yet understand. Tell me one thing, Ethan said. If this wasn't complicated, if Jacob wasn't part of the picture, if nothing stood in the way, what would you want? Daniel hesitated, but not long. He looked at Ethan like revealing the truth was both a relief and a surrender. I'd want to know you without fear. Without guilt. Without lines we're not sure we can cross. His voice thickened. I'd want to be close to you. Ethan's breath trembled. A moment passed before he whispered back. I think I'd want that too. Daniel inhaled sharply, not in shock, not in triumph, but in quiet disbelief. They sat there, hearts unsteady but aligned in a way neither had expected. Finally, Daniel spoke. Then maybe we take this slowly, thoughtfully, carefully. We don't rush. We don't hide. We don't hurt Jacob. We just see where this goes. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange, fragile hope. Yeah, slow is okay. Daniel gave a gentle smile, soft, grateful, full of emotion he still wasn't ready to name. Thank you, he whispered. For what? Ethan asked. For trusting me with your truth, Daniel said. And for not walking away. Ethan's chest warmed. I couldn't walk away. Not from you. The rain faded into silence. And in that silence, something unspoken settled between them. Not a decision, not a promise, but a beginning. The days that followed their honest conversation felt strangely fragile, like something too new and too delicate to name aloud. Ethan found himself moving through the world in a daze, caught between the routine of everyday life and the quiet pull of something that existed only between him and Daniel Reed. He went to work, laughed with coworkers, answered messages from Jacob, but beneath all of it ran an undercurrent he couldn't ignore. The memory of Daniel's voice, soft with vulnerability, saying he wanted to be close to him, carefully, slowly. Ethan had agreed. But he hadn't understood how powerful slowly could feel. The first time he saw Daniel again after that night, they didn't talk about their conversation. They didn't have to. The awareness hung between them, subtle but unmistakable. It started simply. Ethan stopped by the house on a Saturday morning, telling himself it was just habit. Daniel opened the door with a soft smile, no expectations in his eyes, only warmth. "You're up early," Daniel said. "I couldn't sleep," Ethan admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. Daniel nodded gently. "Come in." There were no stolen touches. No intense confessions. Just 2 mugs of coffee, quiet conversation, and the warmth of existing in the same room. But something had changed. Their pauses meant more. Their glances lingered longer. And the air between them carried a tension that felt less like fear and more like possibility. Over the next week, their interactions grew in small, meaningful ways. Daniel texted Ethan more often, not with anything dramatic, just simple messages. "How was your shift? Drive safe, it's raining. Jacob called today. He says he misses you." Yet each message made Ethan's chest tighten with warmth he didn't know how to name. Ethan began stopping by after work, not every day but often enough that Daniel started leaving the porch light on without thinking. Some evenings they sat on the couch with the TV on but barely watched it, lost instead in quiet conversations that drifted from books to life to worries neither had ever voiced before. One night, when Ethan mentioned he'd been feeling lost lately, unsure about his future, unsure about himself, Daniel listened so closely it almost made Ethan's throat tighten. "You're allowed to feel lost," Daniel said. "Life isn't meant to be a straight line. It bends, it twists, and sometimes it brings people into our lives who help us find direction again." The way he said it, the softness, the almost unspoken meaning, sent a gentle warmth through Ethan's chest. Ethan looked at him quietly. "You do that for me. More than you know." Daniel didn't look away. "You do the same for me." Neither of them moved. Neither of them needed to. Moments like that, simple, honest, became their secret rhythm. With each meeting came new understanding, though nothing physical passed between them beyond the occasional brush of hands when reaching for the same mug or the brief touch of a shoulder when sitting too close. Still, those small touches felt monumental. One evening at a cafe, after Daniel finished grading papers, Ethan joined him at a quiet corner table. The place smelled of roasted coffee and warm pastries, and the light from the hanging lamps cast a soft glow across Daniel's face. They talked for hours. About childhood memories. About fears they'd never spoken aloud. About the loneliness that had trailed them both in different shapes. At one point Ethan laughed at something Daniel said, really laughed, the kind that came from deep inside. Daniel watched him with an expression so tender Ethan felt heat rush to his cheeks. "What?" Ethan asked, embarrassed. Daniel shook his head lightly. "Nothing. I just haven't heard you laugh like that before." Ethan swallowed. "Haven't had much reason to." Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm glad I can be one." Ethan looked down but not before catching the softness in Daniel's eyes, a softness meant only for him. But not all moments were easy. Some nights, Ethan felt guilt twist in his stomach thinking of Jacob. His best friend, the person who trusted him, the person who would never imagine what was brewing between Ethan and his father. Once, late at night, Ethan sat in his car outside the Reed house for a full 5 minutes before finally knocking. Daniel opened the door, concern flickering across his face instantly. "Ethan?" Ethan exhaled shakily. "I don't know if I should be here." Daniel's expression shifted. Sadness, understanding, something deeper. "Do you want to come in?" Ethan nodded, almost painfully. Once inside, Ethan paced the living room. "I don't want to hurt Jacob," he said. "I feel like I'm betraying him." Daniel clasped his hands quietly. "We haven't done anything wrong," he said gently. "We're just navigating something we didn't expect." "I know," Ethan whispered. "But I still feel it." Daniel hesitated before speaking. "Ethan, if this becomes too heavy for you, tell me. I will never hold you to something that hurts you." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke Ethan. He shook his head. "It's not that I don't want this. I just don't know how to carry it." Daniel stepped closer, not touching him, just close enough that Ethan could feel his presence. "Then let me carry some of it with you." Ethan looked at him, eyes stinging. "I don't want to lose you." Daniel's voice softened. "You won't." The words were calm, confident, And for the first time Ethan felt that maybe they could do this carefully, slowly, without breaking the world around them. Their moments together grew in quiet intensity. A late walk in the park, where they talked about dreams they'd abandoned too soon. A shared dinner in Daniel's kitchen, filled with laughter and comfortable silence. A night where they sat on the porch while the cicadas sang, their knees almost touching but never quite. Each moment deepened something between them, a connection built on trust, honesty, and a tenderness neither had expected. They were careful. They were quiet. But they were growing closer every day. And though they never labeled what was happening, both of them knew. This wasn't friendship anymore. It was something deeper. Something neither could walk away from. Something that would soon force them to confront truths they weren't ready to face. Because secrets, no matter how gentle, always have a way of pressing against the walls around them. And sooner or later those walls begin to crack. The evening that would change everything began like any other. Ethan hadn't planned to go to Daniel's house. In fact, he had tried not to. After days of growing closeness, quiet moments, lingering glances, emotions woven so tightly they felt impossible to separate, he wanted to give himself space to breathe, space to think. But some things pull stronger than intention. And that night, around 10:30 p.m., after pacing his apartment for nearly half an hour, he got in his car and drove toward Maple Street. The sky was clear, the summer air warm against his skin when he stepped out of the car. Every window in the Reed house was dark except one, Daniel's bedroom light, faint and golden, shining through the curtains. Ethan stared at it for a long moment before walking up the steps and knocking gently. It took almost 30 seconds before the door opened. Daniel stood there barefoot, wearing a soft t-shirt and gray lounge pants, hair slightly mussed, like he'd been reading in bed. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Ethan. "Ethan," he breathed. "It's late." "I know." Ethan swallowed. "I couldn't sleep." Daniel studied him for a long, slow moment. He stepped aside without another question. "Come in." Ethan walked inside, closing the door behind him. The house was quiet. No TV, no music, just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant chirping of insects outside. Daniel crossed his arms, not defensively but thoughtfully. "Is something wrong?" Ethan shook his head. "No. I just needed to see you." Daniel's expression softened in an instant, his shoulders loosening as though those words had been exactly what he didn't know he needed. "Then I'm glad you're here," Daniel said quietly. The living room lamp was off, leaving only moonlight filtering through the windows. It cast shadows across Daniel's face, making him look gentler, more vulnerable. Ethan took a breath. "Can we talk?" "Always," Daniel said. They moved to the couch, sitting closer than they usually did, not touching, but near enough that Ethan could feel the warmth of Daniel's body in the dark. For a moment neither spoke. Then Ethan finally said, "I don't think I can keep pretending this doesn't affect me." Daniel's breath caught. "Pretending what doesn't affect you?" "You," Ethan whispered. The silence that followed was heavy but not frightening, more like two hearts listening for the truth they'd been inching toward for weeks. Daniel lowered his gaze. "Ethan, you know how complicated this is." "I know." Ethan swallowed. "But I can't keep stepping backward and forward at the same time." Daniel's lips parted slightly as if to speak, but no words came. Ethan continued, voice trembling with honesty. "Every time I see you, I feel something I can't explain. And every time I leave, it feels like I'm leaving something behind." Daniel exhaled shakily. "I feel the same. More than I should." Ethan looked at him. "But why shouldn't we feel this? We haven't done anything wrong." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because I don't ever want you to look back and think I took advantage of your trust. Or Jacob's." "You haven't," Ethan said immediately. Daniel shook his head gently. "But the fear is still there. Not because I doubt you, but because I know the world outside this house isn't as kind as what's between us." Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Daniel, what do you want from me?" "Honestly." Daniel froze. "Not physically, emotionally." His breath hitched. His gaze dropped to the floor, then lifted slowly to meet Ethan's eyes. "I want to stop pretending," Daniel whispered. "I want to stop acting like I don't think about you when you're not here. I want to stop pretending that sitting beside you doesn't feel like every answer I've been searching for." Ethan's heart hammered so loudly he thought Daniel might hear it. Daniel's voice trembled. "I want to be close to you. For real. Not just in small moments or quiet conversations. I want something honest. Something that isn't wrapped in fear." Ethan didn't realize he was leaning closer until their knees touched. His voice came out soft but steady. "Then why are we still holding back?" Daniel studied him, eyes filled with conflicted emotion. Because I'm afraid once we cross a certain line, there's no turning back. Ethan nodded slowly. And do you want to turn back? Daniel shook his head, barely more than a whisper. No. The single word hung between them, weighted and fragile. Ethan took a slow breath. Daniel, what if we stop thinking about the future for a moment? What if we stop thinking about Jacob? Or what people might say? Just tonight, we think about what's real between us. Daniel looked at him, eyes shining with something deep and unguarded. And what's real between us, Ethan? Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. This. Before he could second-guess himself, Ethan reached out gently, his fingers hovering near Daniel's hand on the couch. Not touching. Just close. Daniel stared at their hands, then at Ethan, the tension in his face melting into something soft and overwhelming. Slowly, deliberately, Daniel turned his hand palm up. An invitation. Ethan placed his hand in Daniel's. A choice. The touch was simple. No urgency, no rush, but the weight of it sent warmth flooding through both of them. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, holding Ethan's hand like it was something precious he had been afraid to reach for. When he opened them, his voice was barely audible. Ethan, I don't want to lose this. You won't, Ethan whispered. Not if we're honest. Not if we move carefully. Not if we trust each other. Daniel nodded slowly, thumb brushing the back of Ethan's hand. A quiet, intimate gesture that carried more meaning than any kiss. Come with me, Daniel said softly. Ethan's breath caught. Where? To talk, Daniel said with a small, tender smile. Someplace quieter. He led Ethan down the hallway toward his bedroom, not with urgency but with calm, steady intention. When they entered the dimly lit room, Daniel didn't close the door fully. He didn't pull Ethan close or make any sudden move. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space beside him. Ethan sat. Their shoulders brushed. Daniel spoke first. Whatever happens from here, it has to be because we both want it. Not because of loneliness or fear. Because it's real. Ethan nodded, feeling the truth settle warmly inside him. It is real. Daniel looked at him with an expression full of emotion. Care, desire, caution, hope, all tangled into one. Then let's take tonight, Daniel whispered, to stop running from it. Ethan felt something shift inside him, soft and certain. He squeezed Daniel's hand gently. A beginning. A turning point. The moment they finally let the truth breathe between them without fear, without distance, without pretending. Outside the night was quiet. Inside something finally, gently, beautifully changed. The morning after that quiet, life-altering night arrived gently. Sunrise streamed through Ethan's apartment windows, brushing soft gold across the floor. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Daniel sitting beside him, their fingers intertwined, their breaths quiet but full of meaning. Nothing had happened, nothing that crossed any boundaries. But emotionally, something had opened. Something honest. And now Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what came next. He stared at the ceiling for a long time before finally reaching for his phone. No messages. No missed calls. Just silence. He didn't know whether that made him relieved or anxious. By late afternoon, he still hadn't heard from Daniel. He tried to distract himself, making tea, cleaning his desk, watching a movie he didn't pay attention to, but his mind kept circling back to the same worry. What if Daniel regretted it? What if he thought last night was a mistake? At 5:12 p.m. his phone buzzed. Daniel, can we talk? Ethan's heart dropped into his stomach. He typed back quickly. Ethan. Yes. I'm home. Half an hour later, a soft knock sounded on his door. Ethan inhaled and opened it. Daniel stood there in simple jeans and a navy shirt, but his expression told a different story, one filled with tension and exhaustion as if he'd spent the day wrestling with his own thoughts. Hey, Ethan said quietly. Daniel stepped inside. Hey. They stood in silence for a few seconds, both unsure of where to start. Daniel finally exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Last night was, he hesitated, meaningful. The relief that swept through Ethan was almost physical. I'm glad you feel that way too, Ethan said. Daniel nodded, but his eyes held worry. But today, I couldn't stop thinking about the consequences. Ethan's chest tightened. I figured you might. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped tightly. I'm not ashamed of what I feel. But I'm afraid of what this means for your friendship with Jacob. For my relationship with him. He paused. And for you. Ethan sat beside him. Daniel, we're not doing anything wrong. We're two adults. Daniel let out a shaky breath. I know logically. But emotions don't always follow logic. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Jacob trusts you, Daniel said. He talks about you all the time. You're important in his life. And he stopped looking down. I don't want to be the reason that changes. Ethan felt something warm and protective rise in his chest. You won't be. You don't know that, Daniel whispered. What if he finds out? What if he feels betrayed? What if he thinks he swallowed hard. What if he thinks I crossed a line with someone he cares about? Ethan gently touched Daniel's shoulder. We're not crossing any lines. We're taking things slow. We're trying to be honest. Daniel looked at him then, eyes full of worry and affection. But Ethan, love rarely stays simple. It always reaches into places you didn't expect. The word love hit them both at once. Ethan's breath caught, but he didn't pull away. Daniel continued in a quieter voice. I'm scared because I haven't felt this way in years. Not like this. Ethan's chest tightened in a different, deeper way. I know, he whispered. Me too. A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just heavy, full of everything they were afraid to say out loud. Finally, Ethan spoke. Maybe we should make a plan. A plan? Well, something to guide us. So we don't rush. So we don't hurt anyone. So we don't lose control of the situation. Daniel considered that for a moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. What did you have in mind? Ethan shifted so he was facing him directly. First, we stay honest with each other. If one of us feels overwhelmed or confused, we say it. Daniel nodded. Second, Ethan continued, we keep things private for now. Not just secret, private. There's a difference. Daniel's eyes softened. There is. Third, Ethan said gently, we don't let this interfere with your relationship with Jacob. Or mine. Daniel exhaled, some of the tension releasing. That's fair. And lastly, Ethan added, we take things slow. Really slow. Emotionally. Physically. Everything. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again with a look that was both relieved and aching. That actually helps, he admitted. They sat back, shoulders brushing lightly. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel said, there's another complication. Ethan raised his eyebrows. What is it? Daniel looked at him with a vulnerability that startled Ethan. I want to see you. More than I should. Every day if I could. But I'm afraid if we give in to that, we'll lose the balance we're trying to create. Ethan felt heat rise in his chest, part affection, part longing. You don't have to pretend you don't want that, Ethan said softly. I feel it too. Daniel chuckled weakly. That makes it worse. Ethan smiled. Or better. Daniel's expression melted, something tender and helpless playing across his features. Ethan. I'm trying so hard to be responsible. I know. It's not easy. Not with you. Daniel's voice dropped, warm and sincere. You make me feel alive again. The words struck Ethan with deep, quiet intensity. He reached out slowly, giving Daniel time to pull away. Daniel didn't. Ethan took Daniel's hand, holding it gently. We'll figure it out, Ethan whispered. It won't be perfect. There will be moments when we're confused or scared. But we don't have to solve everything today. Daniel looked at Ethan like he wanted to believe him. Promise me something, Daniel said softly. Anything. No matter how complicated things get, don't disappear. Don't pull away. Ethan squeezed his hand. I won't. The sun outside had dipped below the horizon, leaving the apartment bathed in soft blue twilight. The room felt quiet, safe, suspended in its own world. Daniel leaned back against the couch, his shoulder pressing gently against Ethan's. Thank you, he said. For being patient. For not pushing. For understanding. Ethan turned slightly toward him. I'm not here to pressure you, Daniel. I'm here because I care. Daniel's eyes softened even more. I care too. More than I can explain. They sat like that for a long time, close, quiet, connected, letting the complications settle between them without running from them. Love wasn't simple. But it was real. And for the first time, they weren't afraid to face it together. The weeks that followed were quieter, calmer, and yet more confusing than either Ethan or Daniel expected. Their conversations grew deeper, their small moments more meaningful, but the world around them didn't stop. Responsibilities didn't pause. Life continued, bringing with it the choices they had avoided for too long. And the hardest of those choices arrived one cool Sunday morning. Ethan was sitting on a bench outside the small cafe where he usually worked on weekends. The air smelled faintly of coffee beans and rain, and people passed by with hurried steps, unaware of the quiet storm inside him. He had been waiting for Daniel for almost 10 minutes, hands clasped, heart heavy. When Daniel finally approached, Ethan knew immediately that something was different. Daniel's shoulders were tense, his expression serious, not cold but frightened. The kind of fear that came when emotions grew too large to hold quietly. "Hey," Daniel said softly as he sat beside Ethan. "Hey." Ethan tried to smile but it felt thin. For a long moment neither spoke. Daniel looked down at his hands. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." Ethan nodded. "I figured." Daniel swallowed. "Ethan, we're reaching a point where we have to decide what this really is. What we're choosing." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "I know." Daniel glanced toward the street, avoiding Ethan's eyes. "I care about you. So much that it scares me sometimes." His voice softened. "You've brought something into my life that I didn't think I'd feel again." Ethan remained still, listening, really listening. Daniel continued, "But the closer we get, the more I feel the weight of everything around us. Jacob. Our age difference. The secrecy. The fear." He hesitated. "I don't want us to live in shadows." Ethan exhaled shakily. "I don't either." "I know," Daniel said. "And that's the problem. If we want this, if we truly want this, it can't stay hidden forever." Ethan's heart pounded. He hadn't expected the conversation to go this far. "Not today. Not like this." "What are you saying?" Ethan asked quietly. "I'm saying we have 3 paths," Daniel said, turning fully to face him. "And we have to choose one." Ethan's breath caught. "The first," Daniel continued slowly, "is honesty. Telling Jacob. Telling the people close to us. Accepting whatever comes." He paused. "It's the hardest path, but maybe the most real." Ethan felt a shiver run through him, not of fear but of the gravity of it. "The second," Daniel said, "is distance." His voice faltered. "If we believe this is too complicated, too risky, we choose to step back. To protect Jacob. To protect ourselves. Even if it hurts." Ethan's stomach twisted painfully. Daniel took a breath. "And the third is staying together but staying hidden. Trying to balance 2 lives, one private and one public." Ethan already knew that path too well. He had felt the strain of it these past weeks. The secrecy. The carefulness. The fear of slipping. Daniel shook his head. "I don't want to build something with you that I have to hide forever. It doesn't feel fair. Not to you. Not to me." Ethan finally looked up, meeting Daniel's eyes with all the emotion he'd been holding back. "What do you want, Daniel?" Ethan whispered. "Not what's safest. Not what's easiest. What do you want?" Daniel's expression softened into something raw. "I want you." The simplicity of the words nearly broke Ethan. "But wanting you isn't enough," Daniel added quietly. "We have to choose how." Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. Cars passed by. People talked. The world felt normal, ordinary, except for the fact that everything inside him was shifting. He opened his eyes again. "I don't want distance," Ethan said firmly. "I don't want to pretend you don't matter to me. Because you do. More than I expected. More than I can explain." Daniel's throat tightened. "I feel the same. And I don't want to stay hidden forever," Ethan continued. "It'll slowly break us. We'll start resenting the silence instead of appreciating the moments we share." Daniel looked almost relieved to hear him say it. "So honesty," Ethan said softly. "That's the only path that feels like love instead of fear." "It will be difficult," Daniel warned. "Jacob may be confused. Or hurt. Or angry." "I know," Ethan said. "But honesty is still better than losing ourselves." Daniel's eyes glistened with something warm and overwhelming. "You're braver than you think." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I just finally know what I want." Daniel exhaled, shoulders relaxing slightly. "If we do this, it has to be together. Step by step. Carefully." "Together," Ethan agreed. Daniel reached out, hesitating for only a moment before placing his hand over Ethan's. The touch was subtle, hidden between them, unnoticed by the world, but for Ethan, it was everything. "Then I choose love," Daniel said quietly. "Even if it's complicated. Even if it's terrifying. I choose you." Ethan's chest swelled with emotion. He turned his hand palm up, intertwining their fingers gently. "I choose you too," Ethan whispered. They sat like that, hand in hand, hearts steadying, as the morning passed around them. For the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a challenge they could face. Daniel squeezed Ethan's hand. "Tonight, we'll talk to Jacob." Ethan nodded. "We'll be honest. We'll explain everything carefully. Daniel exhaled. Whatever happens, we face it together. Ethan leaned his shoulder against Daniel's. Not hiding. Not afraid. Together, he repeated. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a storm they had to outrun. It felt like a horizon they were choosing to walk toward, slowly, courageously, side by side. Love wasn't simple. It wasn't safe. But it was theirs. And they were finally ready to meet it with open hearts and open eyes.